Now listen, there's something fundamentally misunderstood about silence, particularly in the context of emotional relationships between men and women. And I think it's worth untangling. People think of silence as a void, a nothingness, an absence of communication. But that's a naive understanding. In the psychological domain, especially in intimate relationships, silence is not nothing. It's charged. It carries weight. It carries history. It carries risk. When a woman chooses silence in the presence of someone she's emotionally drawn to, it's not apathy. It's an act of unconscious trust that says more than words can ever structure. Because silence requires safety. No one falls into quiet if they feel endangered. No one softens their voice in the presence of chaos. And no one grows still in the face of emotional threat. So if she's silent with you and not away from you, then you're seeing something most men miss, the initial movement towards surrender, not submission, not weakness, but psychological openness. And that's unbelievably rare. We live in a culture that confuses noise with connection. We equate texting frequency with commitment. We interpret constant conversation as emotional intimacy. But connection, the kind that touches the soul, is not forged in chatter. It's revealed in presence. Silence between two people is not a vacuum unless it's filled with fear. When it's filled with comfort, it's sacred, it's ceremonial, it's a space where the masks fall off and where both people can simply exist without performance. That's not small, it's transformation. The female psyche, more attuned to subtlety, more inclined toward emotional regulation, uses silence not to punish, but to process. She is not running away from you in those moments. She's running deeper into herself. She's sorting out what parts of her history are surfacing. She's feeling the tremors of trust in a world where betrayal has often come wrapped in charm. Her silence is not a retreat, it's an emergence. And if you're quick to judge it, you'll destroy it. Because here's the psychological truth. You can't rush trust. You can't decode it like a puzzle. You have to be worthy of it long enough for her nervous system to stop defending itself. When a woman begins to fall in love, something remarkable happens to her inner world. Her defenses, usually finely honed and reflexively active, begin to melt. Not because she's naive, but because she's sensing safety. That shift is not noisy, it's quiet, it's disarming, it's fragile. And it shows up first not in what she says, but in what she allows herself not to say. You'll know it's happening when her shoulders lower when she sits beside you and doesn't feel the need to entertain, explain, or escape. That's not boredom. That's belonging, beginning to whisper its first syllables. It is in this quiet that the most profound things are communicated, not in paragraphs or arguments or declarations, but in a glance, a softened breath, the choice to remain close when no words are being exchanged. That's the kind of silence that screams presence. And presence is the birthplace of intimacy. Most men never learn to listen to it. They panic. They fill it with stories. They demand clarification. But the ones who are wise, the ones who have suffered enough to recognize subtlety, they lean into that space, not with answers, but with awareness. There is a fundamental biological truth here as well. Human beings regulate each other emotionally, and in emotionally resonant relationships, we co-regulate nervous systems. When a woman is silent and still in your presence, and yet remains by your side, it's possible her system is syncing to yours. That's physiological trust, that's limbic safety, that's the body saying, here, I can rest. You don't find that on dating app. You don't create it with clever lines. You earn it slowly through consistency, integrity, and the absence of threat. And here's where it becomes critical to understand. Emotional silence is a privilege, not a problem. You're not entitled to it. You're not owed it. You are granted it. When she lets herself be quiet around you, she's doing something ancient. She's remembering what it's like to feel human in the presence of another. She's lowering her armor, not because she has to, but because for a brief moment, she believes she doesn't need it. And that's one of the highest compliments a woman can offer. Silence in this context becomes a sacred threshold. It's the gap between defenses and devotion. It's the moment before love becomes language. And most of the time, that gap is terrifying. Because if you misinterpret it, if you react with insecurity or impatience, you'll shatter the bridge that's being built. And that bridge doesn't rebuild easily. You have to be a man strong enough to hold space for what is unspoken. That's not passive, that's presence with purpose. In myth, in poetry, in the deepest teachings of the psyche, there's always this truth. That which is most valuable cannot be spoken immediately. It must be revealed. And that revelation requires stillness. Not deadness, but stillness that's alive with meaning. That's what her silence represents, a doorway, a signal, a testing of the environment. She's watching, not with suspicion, but with sacred hesitation, to see if you're someone she can fall near without falling apart. That silence is her subconscious saying, let me see if you can notice me without needing me to perform. That's devastatingly honest, because most women in most relationships are performing, smiling, nurturing, masking. And if she begins to feel like she doesn't have to do that with you, that she can let go of the false and breathe into what's real, she will begin to bond. Not through drama, not through declarations, but through the quiet willingness to be. And so, the silence you're tempted to mistrust might be the very evidence that trust is being formed. It's not an emptiness, it's a fullness that can't be rushed. You must learn to sit in it with humility, with attention, with reverence. You must become the kind of man who knows how to witness transformation without interrupting it. Because the first sign that she is falling for you isn't loud. It isn't poetic. It isn't even visible to the untrained eye. It's silent, it's slow, it's sacred. And if you can meet her in that silence and not flinch, then maybe, just maybe, you're worth what comes next. We are creatures built on perception, not just logic. And yet we constantly betray ourselves by assuming instead of observing. In the earliest stages of emotional connection, particularly between a man and a woman, what's spoken is often the least truthful part of the exchange. Language can mask, manipulate, defend, but the body, the patterns, the gaze, that rarely lies. To assume you know what someone feels because of what they say is to ignore the deeper currents of human behavior, the unconscious signals that reveal the truth beneath the words. When a woman begins to fall, her words might stay the same, polite, cautious, ambiguous, but her behavior will not. She will look longer, stay quieter, lean closer, and test you not through questions, but through silence. That's where the truth resides, not in what is said, but in what is repeated without being announced. Most men never learn to read the room. They listen to words like they're absolute truth, like a courtroom transcript, but they forget that human emotion is ancient, primal, and rarely direct. A woman may say nothing that suggests affection and yet rearrange her schedule just to sit near you. She might not confess desire, but her pupils dilate when you enter the room, and her voice softens unconsciously when she addresses you. That's not coincidence, that's data. But if your only tools are ears and assumptions, you'll miss it every time, because what's most meaningful is often invisible to the careless. There is an immense psychological difference between projection and perception. Projection is the imposition of your insecurity onto the moment. It's the man who panics when she doesn't text back for 5 hours and invents an entire story of disinterest or deception. Perception, on the other hand, is rooted in pattern recognition. It's the disciplined mind that watches behavior over time and maps meaning from consistency, not crisis. She may speak less, but lean in more. She may fidget nervously, but return to you anyway. That's not distance, that's emotional navigation. If you misread it, you lose her trust before it's even fully given. The female emotional system is not a series of declarations, it's a slow release of guarded energy. Her affections will come not in fireworks, but in the way she chooses to remain close when she has every reason to leave. Her fear may mute her voice, but her actions will whisper her intent. If you lack the psychological literacy to interpret these signs, you will demand clarity too early and kill the very thing that was beginning to bloom. You must observe the whole picture. You must notice the micro movements, the foot pointed in your direction, the hair adjusted subconsciously when you speak, the glance she gives you before laughing at another man's joke. That's where the real messages live, in the tension between what is and what she's still too afraid to admit. Assumption is a form of control. It's the ego's desperate attempt to avoid vulnerability by defining things too quickly. But observation requires humility. It demands that you accept the ambiguity, sit with the unknown, and study her behavior without the safety net of confirmation. That's why it's hard. That's why most avoid it. Because watching someone fall in love is terrifying when you don't know if you're imagining it. But that fear, that risk of misreading, is the very cost of intimacy. You can't have connection without the willingness to be wrong. You can't have love without the courage to observe first and speak later. If she's falling, she won't always tell you, but she'll show you. Over time, she will find reasons to be near you, even when she has nothing to say. She will start to mirror your energy. Her breathing may synchronize with yours when you sit in silence. She will recall little details you forgot you shared. Her laughter will come faster, but her eye contact will last longer. These aren't accidents. These are revelations, subtle, sacred revelations, but only if you're awake enough to notice. Most men are not. They are asleep behind assumptions. They walk through emotional minefields, blindfolded, demanding clarity from someone who's speaking in a different language entirely. And then they wonder why connection crumbles. Reading beyond words means training yourself to see, not just to look, but to see deeply. It means noting the space between the lines. It means paying attention to the nervous touch of her fingers on a glass, the delayed reply paired with a careful explanation, the shift in tone when your name comes up unexpectedly. These are not trivial details. These are seismic clues, and they require a mind that's disciplined enough not to react, but to register. That's the difference between boys and men. One assumes, the other observes. In evolutionary psychology, mate selection has never been solely verbal. Our ancestors relied on subtlety, a glance across a fire, a shift in body orientation, a breath held longer than usual. These were survival cues, intimacy signals, emotional currencies. We have not evolved past them. We have only become distracted by digital noise and conditioned to ignore them. But they still govern us. They still matter. And the man who can read these signs today has a massive advantage, not to manipulate, but to connect more deeply than any text or speech ever could. You cannot see the truth of a person until you let go of your need to hear it spoken. That's the hard reality. Love does not enter the world shouting its arrival. It enters through glances, pauses, hesitations, subtle alignments. And a woman who is unsure whether she's safe with you will not announce her heart. She will test your presence in the in-between moments. How do you react to her silence? Can you sit with her in discomfort? Do you reach to fix things too quickly? Or do you hold space and let her find the rhythm? These are the trials of emotional maturity, and most fail them. By speaking when they should be watching. The feminine is not theatrical by default. It becomes that way only when it feels unseen. But in its honest form, it's quiet, layered, and cautious. And if she begins to feel something for you, something real, something destabilizing, she will retreat into herself to sort through it before offering it to you. That retreat is not rejection. It is the processing of love. And the only man who will ever be worthy of what comes next is the one who doesn't demand, who doesn't panic, who doesn't assume, but who watches with clarity, with patience, because the signs are always there, in her rhythm, in her timing, in her contradictions, in the questions she asks you that seem oddly personal, in the way her tone shifts when you talk about other women, in the way she lets her guard drop in half-second increments, hoping you'll notice. And if you do, if you notice truly, if you respond not with conclusions but with care, you become the one man she can trust. Not because you deciphered her like a puzzle, but because you didn't try to force the answer. Observation is intimacy. It is respect. It is the quiet honor of saying, I see who you are becoming even before you say it. And if you can offer that to a woman who is on the edge of falling, you don't need to ask how she feels. She'll show you in every breath she takes near you